It's Craig and Richard here. It's good to be back together again, and all the team behind the scenes helping out with the course. It's fantastic, and great to have so many new learners, but also return learners as well. And many have, of course, done the introductory course.
Mindfulness for Wellbeing and Peak Performance.
That's right.
Yep.
And some are doing this course without much experience in mindfulness, and it's a much more natural, sort of graduation to go from the first to the second course. And so many...
Some of the stuff in this course can actually be a bit challenging.
Yeah. So go steadily at your own pace, and maybe consider if you are feeling a little bit at sea, is to maybe defer this one and go back to the other one and then follow through.
Or even just skip steps, and come back to them later on, which a lot of our learners do.
Yeah. So... And also, Sherelle and Liv are providing some great support, and they're our mentors in the course.
So please follow them.
Yeah, yeah. So lots of useful comments there. There's been a lot of discussion as well about the difficulty of maintaining a regular practice.
It's definitely a challenge, isn't it? And something that I think a course like this is very good at supporting, because we have these 4 weeks together where we really explore how to start meditating and establish a routine and apply mindfulness embedded into our lives. But then a lot of our learners have noticed that once the course finishes, that's when it gets quite challenging. And I think it's pretty normal to have a practice that sort of in the beginning comes and goes. But it's very important to keep coming back to that formal practice every day, at least a few minutes of meditation, just to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, that's right. If you read something on a regular basis that is along those lines, if you've got friends or you attend a group where people are interested in this, it helps a lot. But I mean, the main thrust of the world is to push us in the other direction.
Very unmindful world, isn't it?
That's right, and it's easy to get swept away by that. There's been some interesting discussion too about the ADEPT acronym, and it is helpful. A question though, but why is it easier to form bad habits rather than good ones? Well, I've never struck that before, but look, I think one of the main reasons is that the different areas of our brain, the executive functioning area, the limbic emotional system, and then the appetitive system, and they vie for, I suppose, dominance one way or another. And the appetitive part, the part that's seeking pleasure and avoiding discomfort, is pretty much the loudest. It's often the most obvious, the strongest. And the executive functioning decision about...
So that's the cortex.
Yeah, and the bit to make our decisions about what's enough, when to stop eating, when to get out of the chair and exercise, and so on. That area of the brain often needs a little bit of exercise of its own, and it gets a bit of a workout in mindfulness.
And of course, when we're stressed, it just shorts out, and other parts of the brain start to run the show. So that's right. I think that's why when we're stressed, we stop meditating and stop eating well and stop exercising. Yeah.
So it's like that's the stuff that makes its decisions just based on pleasure and pain, comfort or discomfort, is often making the decision. So it's easy to get into unhelpful habits and not undertake healthy habits like exercise and sitting down meditating when we're being tugged in the other way.
That's right. And so that's yet another reason why we want to strengthen the prefrontal cortex and the executive functions, and ideally not wait till we're stressed to do it, but to have an everyday practice where for 5-10 minutes every day we're sitting and meditating, strengthening that part of the brain.
Yeah. And it's one of the reasons too why there's a lot of interest in how mindfulness can help with things like addictions.
Yes.
Which is that appetitive, the mesolimbic reward system firing off dopamine all the time, or needing to fire off dopamine all the time.
And emotion regulation as well. Yeah,
that's right.
And that's why, a lot of our learners have found that having a time and place that's set really helps to establish a practice, tying it into an existing routine. That's one of the best things that we can do. So for me, I get up in the morning, and before I have breakfast and start my day, I like to sit and meditate. And that for me is a time that works. But of course, it's different for different people.
Well, some people have found a great resistance to developing a routine.
Yeah.
Or sometimes there can be a kind of rigidity. Oh, I can't practice my meditation unless it's at this time and it's in this seat and it's in, and so we do want to be very flexible and adaptable at the same time.
So it's finding that balance perhaps between having a routine but also being a bit flexible around it.
That's right, yeah. And in the amount that we practice as well.
Yes.
So because we could have a longer practice, we could have a shorter practice, but, it can be a very flexible thing. Like before stepping up to speak, for example, you could just have that couple of seconds to just sort of center yourself. Pause and to deliver, just to sort of make sure that we're just present and then deliver from that sort of attentive, aware place.
Or before walking into the door of your house, maybe hand on the door handle, just take a pause, take a breath, and then into the house.
Yeah, it could be a half minute or a minute just before stepping into the exam room. So we want to be very adaptable and to adapt it to context and time and place. How long or short? Well, the comma, for example.
Not the coma.
The comma,
Yeah.
There's the full stop. But what about John Kabat-Zinn's 3-minute breathing space? Well, I think that's a kind of a semicolon, right? So it's somewhere between a comma and a full stop. But really, there's no set sort of idea. But the more often we bring in those little moments of mindfulness during the day, especially if we've got a longer practice, either side of the day, then we start to bring more awareness into the midst of the activities.
Yeah, so it's a scalable practice, isn't it? Just finding the right amount of time, whether it's 1 minute, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, and then as you said, just peppering the day with moments of mindfulness and bringing that mindful awareness to every activity that we do. That's the other way that we need to be practicing mindfulness.
Now it's come up about boredom during meditation.
I've never experienced that during meditation. Have you?
No, I didn't.
Well, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? And a lot of learners talk about that like it's a problem.
Yeah.
But actually, I think it's good to notice because it's very hard to keep the mind in one place. And the mind does wander off and think, okay, the breath, I get that, or whatever it is, what's next? And actually, if we're paying attention, we can notice in that moment, any moment that we're feeling bored, we're not being present and we're not practicing mindfulness. Guaranteed, the mind has wandered off somewhere else and we're already thinking about what we'd rather be doing, or we're judging what we're doing in the moment, thinking, this is actually really boring. And if we can notice that we're caught up in that, the practice is just to bring the attention back to the present moment. And again, that's just...
So like the attention's being very subtly siphoned away with an internal dialogue about, this is going on so long or I'm bored. It means that the attention's not actually on the breath, the body, or whatever it's as a resting point.
Well, that's right, yeah. And so learning to just be with simple things like the body or the breath is very important because we have a lot of trouble these days just sitting quietly in our room, and that, of course, is the source of a lot of our problems. And so to practice doing that, very important skill. And also, of course, I notice that when I'm really curious and present, I'm not particularly bored. Something like breath is quite interesting if we pay attention to it.
Yes. Yep. What's not interesting is the internal dialogue about boredom, because that can start to just superimpose itself. And I think it does for a lot of kids these days, pretty much over anything and everything that a person could be experiencing. And so it's just like putting on some dark glasses and seeing, through.
Yes.
The place seems a lot duller because we're not really looking, we're not really connected.
No. A lot of learners getting distracted by sounds as well, or how quiet it is.
Yeah. Well, then, yes. I mean, the whole sensory apparatus wakes up when we're more mindful. Yeah. Yeah. Which is interesting. The question around, differences between John Kabat-Zinn, Herbert Benson, and Mark Williams. Yeah. And John Kabat-Zinn very much came to mindfulness, of course, from the Buddhist training, extensive Buddhist training and practice that he'd had, very deep contemplative life. Herbert Benson came at it from a scientific point of view. Yeah. His initial research was on TM.
Transcendental meditation.
Yeah. And so all around the relaxation response, whether it's through TM or any other form. So he says very much as a relaxation response, where in the mindfulness perspective, it's not primarily about relaxation, primarily about awareness, but there's obvious overlap. And Mark Williams came at it from very much a cognitive, psychological background and how to sort of marry the contemplative side of it with the psychological understanding. And so there's just, being flexible with the form, but faithful to the philosophy of it is really, I think, very important. But they all have different perspectives that are very valuable.
But all describing the same universal thing. I mean, we can all pay attention, we get distracted, we get caught up in things that stress us out, and we can bring the attention back to what we're doing. And I'd say that's quite a universal thing. It doesn't really matter what someone's background is necessarily. Yes. The experience ultimately is going to be the same.
Yeah. But Herbert Benson certainly coined the term the relaxation response and wrote a famous book on that many years ago. And Mark Williams and his team,
mindfulness-based cognitive therapy,
and T-Style, they MBCT, and they really put that on the map. And it was probably their work that was the catalyst more than anything else for,
popularising mindfulness and for the research.
Yeah.
Yeah. Difference between perhaps being totally engrossed in an activity or in the zone or focused compared to being mindful? Very interesting question came up around that.
Yeah. It's subtle and interesting differences. Like sometimes you can see somebody who's on television or gaming, and the attention's fixated in a kind of a trance-like state, which may be a bit different to the immersion, the absorption associated with doing something that's really subtly nuanced in a way like the music or really engrossing oneself in the study. I think they're two quite different states, although I'm not sure how much the research yet has really teased those states apart. But if somebody's doing something with real immersion, playing music and so on, really subtly, in touch with the instruments, connected with the orchestra and so on, that's mindfulness.
Yes.
That's awareness. That's connection.
Yeah. And, we probably also want to distinguish between concentration and that open monitoring that's associated with mindfulness. Because, rock climbing is an example that comes up, and you're up on a rock face. I climb sometimes, and there's just the rock and your hand there, and you're right there in the moment. So in a sense, that's mindfulness, but it's also, you call it concentration or being in the zone. And when we sit resting the attention in the senses but are aware of what we're thinking and feeling and everything that's happening around us, that open monitoring is in some ways more akin to what the mindfulness literature is talking about, so that we can just allow thoughts and feelings to come and go without getting caught up in them.
Yes. And I think if we're really mindful, there's a kind of a contextual awareness that comes in. I'll give an example, say as a doctor in the emergency department, this is a real experience, but attending to a patient who was having quite a severe asthma attack. And the relatives were at the end of the bed, and I was just aware that there was a conversation behind me of the relatives being asked to leave. And I could feel the emotional upset that this was causing at both ends of the bed, and just a kind of awareness of that, and turn the attention and say, no, it's all right, able to stay. So it was like looking after the emotional human side of the interaction as well as the medical one. So just to shift to that for a moment and to come back. But there was this kind of broader awareness where I just wasn't fixated on the... Just
on the patient or just on one thing?
Just on getting in that IV line, etc. There was a kind of an ability to engage. And I think that when we're in a trance-like state and the parent's saying to a child, it's time to go now, so that's a different thing.
Yeah. So emotion regulation as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you like to say something about that? And is that, expressing emotions freely, is that a part of emotional regulation?
Well, we can express our emotions mindfully, I would say. Yeah. I mean, look, we cover this in detail next week, so I won't go into too much detail here, but to experience or express emotions mindfully doesn't mean to not feel emotion or never to say what we're thinking or not to express how we're feeling. It just means to do that with some awareness, some mindfulness.
Yeah.
Perhaps notice what we're feeling without reacting to it. Notice what we're thinking without getting caught up in it. And to be able to describe perhaps the emotional state that we're in without getting too caught up in that or blaming someone else for it or venting it. So there's a fine line there, but mindfulness can be very helpful there.
Yes. So whether not or whether expressing, to do it with some awareness and some discernment.
Yes.
Yes. So anyway, we'll be exploring that in more detail as well.
Yep. Mindful communication?
Yes. And there's often this kind of competition between listening to the dialogue about what should I say next or rehearsing, and actually listening to what the person says, and to sort of get into the sense of just allowing that to flow. It can get a little bit clunky, especially initially when we kind of...
Like any new skill that we're practicing in the beginning, perhaps.
Come out of automatic pilot, and all of a sudden we start interfering with the natural process of communication. Yeah.
So, of course, we want to listen when people are talking and maybe not rehearse what we're going to say, but then I guess sometimes we do need to think about what we want to say next. So it's that fine line, isn't it, between... Yeah. But I think just bringing awareness to our communication and noticing how unmindful it can be at times is a really good start there.
Yes. One of the things that often happens when conversations, especially arguments, escalate is there's a lot of talking and there's no listening.
That's right.
And that's not helpful.
And look, mindfulness is really about connection, being connected with ourselves and with the present moment and with the people around us. So if we're doing all the talking or we're letting someone else do all the talking and we're starting to feel disconnected from them, I would argue that that's not perhaps a particularly mindful moment or a particularly mindful communication. There needs to be a sort of a give and a take.
Yes.
And we should really check in how connected am I feeling to myself and to the person I'm talking to, and use that as a barometer perhaps for how useful that communication or that interaction is, but also how mindfully we're doing that.
Yes, yeah. There was some questions coming up about, is 80% of communication non-verbal?
Yeah, so that's that Mahabrian's sort of research there. Now, that's been questioned. Is it 80%? Is it 90%? I don't know, some part of communication is
74,
verbal.
74.
Oh, it's 73 point something, but anyway, some part of communication is verbal and some parts non-verbal. Let's just say that. That's obvious. And so we want to be attuned not just to the words that people are saying, but also to things like facial expression and gestures and tone of voice and rate of speech, so that we're really deeply listening. Because there's a deep listening that comes about when we're listening mindfully. And in fact, that's associated with increased empathy. That's why we teach it to our medical students and other students here.
Yeah, and that's where you often pick up, you know, the background to what somebody's saying. Somebody says, yes, I'm happy about that. And you pick up in the tone of the voice that they're actually not happy about that. The words say one thing, but it'll only be in the subtle inflection of the voice, in the body language, that the actual authentic message is often conveyed. And we don't want to get too intellectual about it. It's just really a matter of being present and aware, and we may notice or pick up things. If we're thinking too hard about it, we'll probably make it hard work.
That's right. And Craig, a lot of our learners have noticed that technology gets in the way of being mindful and certainly communicating mindfully. So we included a really useful handout on this. We go into a lot of detail around this, and particularly around multitasking in mindfulness for wellbeing and peak performance. So maybe we won't speak too much about it here.
And the idea a lot of workplaces actually expect it and demand it, and maybe it could be a subtle sort of change of emphasis, that being able to efficiently switch attention from one thing to another is very useful, but trying to do multiple things, complex things at the same time, is a recipe for disaster.
It's a nice light bulb moment for people when they realise that multitasking is actually impossible, that complex multitasking or actually attention switching, and it does decrease performance. And when people start seeing the research around that, well, then they tend to get pretty interested in maybe sharing that research with their boss.
Yeah, that's right. Reframe the conversation. So that's all we'll cover for this week, but it's fantastic to see so much great activity going on, so much communication between learners all around the world.
Definitely. Please keep doing that. Please keep supporting each other. Follow the mentors, as we said.
And mindful relationships, empathy, compassion. This is some pretty important stuff, but can also be challenging but very interesting stuff. So we'll look forward to being with you again next week.
Yep.